Welcome to the Tara Palmeri Show. Today we've got a special guest. We have a journalist who has been covering the Jeffrey Epstein story probably longer than anyone else out there. In fact, my next guest, Nick Bryant, actually was the first journalist to get his hands on Epstein's little black book and the flight logs. And he was finally able to publish it. But it took him a very, very long time. And he was rejected by so many publishers and magazines and newspapers. And then he finally got Gawker, a media blog in New York, to publish it. And it didn't quite make the bang that we all expected. It didn't have that sort of impact of a major story about a sex trafficking operation, including some of the most powerful people in the world. Now, a lot of people confuse the little black book with the Epstein client list. The little black book, they're just Epstein's friends. They're his contacts. But arguably, if they spent time with him, they would know that a man who needs 3 massages, that's 3 times per day when he would sexually abuse girls, that this man was up to no good and perhaps took part in it themselves. So at the very least, they could be seen as enablers for not doing anything about it. But yeah, Nick got these very crucial pieces of evidence from lawyers for the victims. And he's been following this story since at least 2012. And even before that, he said he's been on to the Jeffrey Epstein story. And we talk about all of that, the rough road to publishing, and how he's become an activist now for the victims. He has a nonprofit called Epstein Justice. And it's he's calling on people to reach out to their legislators. They actually pick one every week, and their congressmen, their senators, and to call them, to pressure them to vote to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. As we know, there will be a House vote soon if this discharge petition passes. And Speaker Mike Johnson has tried his hardest to make sure that his members, that these Republicans don't have to vote against releasing the Epstein files, because nearly 90% of the public wants the files out there. He even changed the schedule, the summer schedule, so that these members would not have to vote. Obviously, they are feeling pressure from President Trump, their donors. As I've talked about many times before, the web that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell lived in, the power circles, it's insidious. It's a part of the swamp. It is everything that is really kind of corrupt in our political system. So Nick goes into all of his activism. He talks about the long road to making people care about the Jeffrey Epstein story, why it has been disregarded for so long. And of course, we get into some spycraft towards the end. As with everything in the Epstein story, there's so much intrigue around Jeffrey Epstein and his intelligence, and his possible connection to intelligence circles, and why there would be anything of national security inside the Jeffrey Epstein files, as Attorney General Pam Bondi suggested. So stick around for this very interesting interview with a man who is very passionate. And I've got to say, it's really refreshing to see a male journalist really believe in this story and follow it for decades, and see it through the eyes of the survivors and really demand justice for them, because it often feels like it's women that say, we're not being heard, we're not being seen. And it's really something to hear, and to hear his level of compassion and his desire for justice. So take a listen here. Nick Bryant, thank you so much for joining the show. I've got to say, a lot of people talk about who's actually been covering the Epstein story and for how long, and you have been at this probably longer than most. And obviously you were the first person to gain access to Epstein's little black book, his book of contacts. Can you tell our audience how you came across it, why you sought it out, how you obtained it, just the whole process of getting this, I would say key piece of evidence into Jeffrey Epstein's orbit? Even if you're in the little black book, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a sex offender, but it certainly puts together the pieces of who this person was around and could provide witnesses for the many, many victims.
Yes, I put up the black book, and also I was the first guy to put up the flight logs. And how
did you get the flight logs, by the way? How did you get all this evidence?
I got the flight logs and the black book through victims' attorneys.
Okay.
So that was, but what happened, I wrote a book called The Franklin Scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal, about a network exactly like Epstein's. I mean, they're almost like a carbon copy. And I started that book in 2002, and I published it in 2000, and it was published in 2009, 2010. And in that book, there's a very corrupt grand jury, like there was in the Epstein case. I don't know if your audience is familiar with how grand juries work, but a special prosecutor is chosen to oversee a grand jury, and he or she selects evidence that the grand jurors see and calls witnesses that the grand jurors hear. And grand jurors are citizens that have just shown up for jury duty, and they've been funneled to a grand jury, and they're very easy to manipulate. And there was a New York Supreme Court judge that said special prosecutors have so much power over grand jurors that they could get them to indict a ham sandwich.
I remember that. It's a famous quote.
And both the Epstein grand jury and the Franklin grand jury both declared that no children had been abused whatsoever. But then I was
the actual phrase was, "There are no victims here," is what the state attorney's deputy said.
Lana Belovic. Good old Lana Belovic. Yeah. She should be mentioned all the time when we talk about an Epstein cover-up.
Right.
So I was reading these accounts of Epstein molesting these underage girls, and then this grand jury said that he hadn't molested anybody. And that kind of, I was a little exhausted. I'd been working on the Franklin scandal for about 7 years. And I did not want to investigate another network, but I saw that the mainstream media wasn't doing anything about this. So in 2012, I flew down to Florida. I live in New York City, and I flew down to Florida, and I just started knocking on doors and do the things that reporters do. Mm-hmm. And I cultivated a relationship with one of the victims' lawyers, and he ultimately gave me the black book. And I came back to
that he got through discovery, I'm guessing, right?
Yes.
In a lawsuit.
And it had been impounded by the FBI. And I came back to New York City, and I was showing all these editors and publishers the black book, and no one wanted to touch it. I had the black book for like 3 years before anyone was willing to touch it. And
did they tell you why they didn't want to touch it?
When I was pitching the Franklin scandal to editors and publishers, the Franklin scandal is in many ways like the Epstein scandal. As I said, it was a huge pedophile network that flew kids around the country. It was covered up by federal law enforcement. It was hooked up to blackmail and intelligence, very, very similar to the Epstein case. So when I was pitching the Franklin case, I could see this cognitive dissonance going down with the editors and publishers that I was talking to. They were thinking to themselves, this is really a horrible story, and I need to help Nick Bryant. Or I can choose box B and say, I think Nick Bryant's crazy, and I don't have to do anything about this story, and I can have a nice meal with my family tonight. And I knew a lot of people in New York publishing, and I knew that most of them would go to door B, but I didn't think that all of them would go to door B. So that was the problem with the Franklin scandal, and I had to get it published. Two agents tried to sell it, or I gave it to my agent at that time, and she summarily dismissed me. And then I got another agent that tried to sell the Franklin scandal, and he couldn't do it. And these are both good agents, and no one wanted to trifle with that story. So it was ultimately published by a very small press on the West Coast. But when I came across Epstein's black book, I started calling the names of the girls that were under massages. That was his euphemism for underage molestation. Right. And one told me about being flown to an island. Another told me about being flown to different states. And at that point, I realized that Jeffrey Epstein was running a nationwide or international pedophile network. So I went back to New York and I said, Epstein is almost a carbon copy of the Franklin scandal. And still, editors and publishers didn't want to touch it.
Do you think they were afraid of getting lawsuits and being sued? I mean, that's always the first thing that I sense when I'm talking to talking to an editor or going up to standards, that they're very cautious. They don't actually want to stick their necks out at all, even if they know the story is true.
Yes, editors don't want to jeopardize their jobs. And in 2015, I met John Cook, who was the editor-in-chief of Gawker, and he was willing to do it. He was willing to publish it. And at that time, I'd had the Black Book for 3 years, and I'd just been sitting on it. And I was just, a lot of people think that was kind of an epic thing, me publishing the Black Book and the flight logs. But I was just glad that someone was going to publish it and let me write articles about it, that it was going to be published on a large platform.
And did you feel the impact of the story when it hit?
Well, that's the thing. I saw all this ink getting dumped on stories about the Black Book, and no one really wanted to talk to me about it. I mean, Vanity Fair was the only magazine that wanted to talk to me about the Black Book. Meanwhile, all these other magazines can't write articles on the Black Book fast enough. So I'm grateful for Vanity Fair that they singled me out and said that I had published the Black Book and the flight logs.
Yeah. It seems like the story really only took the nation's imagination after the Miami Herald's series came out, Perversion of Justice, and then Alex Acosta was forced to resign. But, I remember at the New York Post that we were fully aware of Jeffrey Epstein and his scandals, and there were reporters that were running to his house and to the houses of his victims and his friends. It wasn't entirely a secret in New York City circles, but yet it wasn't covered by the press. And we know that ABC News was working on a big story, and that Brad Edwards tried really hard. He's the lawyer for the victims, to get the story out there. And he struggled to get any mainstream media to pick it up and to cover it.
And that shows how spineless our media is. I've been on Epstein since 2012, and I'm not aware of one major media outlet that's called for justice. They're very good at digging up salacious dirt, but they don't really seem to care about justice for all these victims, which I find mind-boggling. I mean, it's still that way. Epstein has mushroomed lately, but I still don't see any mainstream media outlets calling for justice. The federal government came out with that very strange document on July 6th, and it said that there were 300 gigabytes of information that were seized from Epstein, which I do agree with. The New York Times, the day after Epstein was arrested in Teterboro Airport in 2019, his safe in New York, his New York mansion was sought open. It was a huge safe, more like a closet than a safe. And the New York Times reported that hundreds, if not thousands, of discs were taken out, and a lot of it was child abuse material. And then Business Insider reported that 2 hard drives had been taken out too. So the feds had all this stuff in 2019. And then Pam Bondi goes on Fox in February and says she's going to release the Epstein files. And then she releases a nothing sandwich. And then she says she's been bamboozled by the FBI and that she's going to make sure that the FBI doesn't bamboozle her this time. But she said something that really kind of dug herself into a deeper hole. She said, only matters of national security will be redacted. So now she has to tell us what a bunch of child molesters have to do with national security.
That's a really good point. That's That is a huge point. Also, just the fact that the FBI said when they arrested Ghislaine Maxwell that there was as many as 1,000 victims. How could just one man, abuse 1,000 victims? It seems unfathomable, especially when you hear from some of the victims who've come forward, and really only a small handful of them have actually decided to speak about their stories. And they say that they were abused multiple times by Jeffrey Epstein over years. I mean,
and
Virginia
others.
Giuffre, exactly. And they speak, and in their court documents, especially Virginia Giuffre, she speaks about being, passed around like a fruit platter to his friends. So yeah, there's so much there, and so little that we even really know, or at least the public knows. But
And Pam Bondi also said that the child abuse material that they had showed Epstein abusing children. She actually said that. And then the FBI comes out and says that, yeah, you're right. Epstein and Maxwell acquired and abused over 1,000 victims by themselves. It's a very absurd story that they want the American public to buy. I just, it baffles me.
Yeah. Well, here we are. And we are probably nowhere closer to the truth. I do want to get into that, where we are right now, and your nonprofit, Epstein Justice. Can you tell our listeners about it and what it does?
I started a nonprofit organization called Epstein Justice, and we've got a stellar staff and we've got a stellar advisory board. I had seen, as I said earlier, I had written about a network just like Epstein's, and then Epstein, and I saw both covered up, and I just felt like the government shouldn't be in the business of covering up child sexual trafficking. If you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So essentially, our government has been aiding and abetting child sex trafficking since it made that dirty deal with Acosta, or since Acosta made that dirty deal with Epstein in 2007. And right now, we have Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna offering a discharge petition, and it's House Resolution 581. Now, we seem to have a majority there. There was a woman that was elected to the 7th District of Arizona, I believe, and her name was Adelita Rojava. And she is going to give 218 votes to the discharge position. But then the discharge position becomes bill. It'll become Bill 165, and then the House will vote on it. And if through some miracle it gets through the House, then the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, he can quash it right there without the Senate voting on it. And he has said things to that effect. But if it gets past the House, and then it gets past John Thune, and then it's voted on, and Chuck Schumer put a rider on a defense bill a couple of weeks ago, and the defense bill said that the Epstein file, or the rider said that the Epstein file should be released and that Epstein should be investigated. And it was voted down 51-49 in the Senate. So if Massie and Ro Khanna's Bill 165 can make it through the House, can make it through John Thune, can make it through the Senate, then it goes before Donald Trump, who hasn't been very receptive to helping Epstein's victims out. Now,
he's called it a hoax.
Yes, he's called it a hoax. And that's the exact same word that one of the grand juries used to cover up the network that I wrote about, a hoax. So that word is extremely chilling to me. And then we've got Mike Johnson's antics. There's something seriously wrong with Mike Johnson. He is the one, he's the Speaker of the House that's prevented the House from voting on the discharge petition. And he adjourned the House early so it couldn't vote on the discharge position. And then
that's a pretty extreme move.
And then he said Trump was an FBI informant vis-a-vis Epstein, which was a lie that the Trump administration didn't even want to propagate. So, and he's got
So
a
he had to take it back.
He's got a strange app on his phone. It's called Covenant Eye. And his 17-year-old son has Covenant Eye on his phone so they can monitor each other's consumption of pornography. And now he wants to delay the woman, the representative from Arizona, being sworn in for that 218th vote. And I don't know why he's fighting so hard. I mean, we've got 217 people in the House that are aiding and abetting child molestation, and we've got 49 people in the Senate that are aiding and abetting child molestation. And then we've got an administration that's aiding and abetting child molestation. And we as Americans, we have to take back our power. A CBS poll found that 89% of Americans want full disclosure and an investigation of the Epstein case. And that's what we need. And what we're proposing at Epstein Justice is an independent congressional commission. An independent congressional commission is the way to go here. It does need a majority in the House, and it does need a majority in the Senate. But I think that can be done. Epstein Justice, we're growing every day, and every week we have a legislator of the week that we have people call. And I think I've been told that if a legislator gets like 20 calls on a subject, it definitely perks up their ears. So we've been doing that for quite some time. And what we want is an independent.
That's the magic number.
What's that?
That's the magic number, 20.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. And we want an independent congressional commission. And the independent congressional commissions have been completely independent of politicians. I mean, politicians have taken part in them occasionally, but independent congressional commissions are often called when there's something that the Congress doesn't want to deal with, and an independent congressional commission will make it easier for the Congress to deal with it and make it easier for the public to deal with that. And the Epstein case is the perfect case for an independent congressional commission. And it's something that we really need to do. We cannot let our government let all these girls get molested with impunity. And there were over 1,000 of them. Our government even says that. But only 225 came forward to get money from Epstein's victim compensation program. And 150 were awarded compensation, and 12 declined compensation, because if you got compensation from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, you signed a release where you couldn't sue anybody else. And these 12 women who declined, I believe, don't want to sign because they have multiple perpetrators. But the fact that there's so many of these victims out there, or survivors, and only 225 came forward, shows that they're terrified.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think even after survivor Lisa Phillips said, we're going to come up with our own list, I spoke to so many of the women afterwards, and they said they were terrified that she even said that. They felt like she put a target on all their backs. So it's a really scary place to be. I don't know. I find it hard to believe that you're going to get a majority for a congressional commission. I hate to be a downer, but if you think that that's possible, I mean,
it's our only hope.
Right.
It's our only hope. And I think my belief is that we will get politicians that will have signed on. Actually, Thomas Massie has signed on to Epstein Justice. And we will get other legislators, and then we will shame and harass the legislators that do not want to vote for independent congressional commission. But it's an independent congressional commission is our only hope for justice. And we really need justice. We can't let this abomination rule our government. I believe, and I saw this in the Franklin scandal, and I wrote a book called Confessions of a DC Madam, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Videotape with Henry Vincent, who ran a gay escort service in DC. And intelligence agents would use his escorts to compromise politicians. So we've seen compromised politicians in the Franklin scandal. We've seen it in Confessions of a DC Madam, and we've seen it with Epstein. And I believe that the reason why we're not getting justice is our political system.
It is, or the donors. You wrote that you believed, that there are donors involved in this right now, or working on disinformation campaigns. We know from Virginia Giuffre Roberts' defamation case that she accused Senator Mitchell of
molestation
of Maine. Of molestation. Bill Richardson, who's deceased, they're both are deceased, and she's accused others, and in the political sphere. So, and she's only one that we and there are others, I'm sure.
Well, she also named Ehud Barak, who was the former prime minister of Israel, and he was head of Israeli military intelligence at one point, and Les Wexner too.
Right.
The potentate of L-Brands, the former potentate of L-Brands. And this is the reporting on this story has been so disingenuous. Wexner gave Epstein power of attorney in 1991. So Epstein could do whatever he wanted with Wexner's money.
That's crazy. He made $200 million off of Les Wexner. Isn't that great? That's insane. Off of one person.
And Wexner's a billionaire. So Epstein had lots of money to play with. And Vanity Fair reported, and you can't make something like this up. Vanity Fair reported that the reason why Les Wexner gave Jeffrey Epstein power of attorney over his vast fortune, the keys to his kingdom, is because he was lonely. You can't make it up. And then Leon Black
introduced him to his wife, Abigail.
Yes. And then Leon Black gave Epstein $160 million, and it was reported that Leon Black gave him $160 million because Epstein was helping him with his taxes. Now, a billionaire like Leon Black has got like a battalion of accountants to make sure that he doesn't pay a penny more than he has to. Yeah. So the reporting on this story has not only it's really been just egregious, and it's not called for justice, and it's pumped out cover stories that are just absurd.
Often, I think, based in fear. Journalism very much hindered by fear of litigation and powerful forces. So not a lot of heroes in this story. So appreciate what you're doing.
A major hero in this story is Michael Ryder. He was the chief of the Palm Beach Police Department, and he would not let this go. I mean, we would, if it wasn't for Michael Ryder, we wouldn't even know the name of Jeffrey Epstein.
No, it's true. He refused to just accept this idea that there are no victims. Barry Krischer was the state attorney, and he completely dismissed these women. They found MySpace pictures of them and said that they were promiscuous. They smoked. They spent time with boys, so they should not be believed. They actually went out of their way to paint them as prostitutes. And this was in collusion with Alan Dershowitz, who was Epstein's lawyer. I mean, I don't know any other word to use besides collusion, because that's what it felt like. They were colluding to indict a ham sandwich, as you say, or not indict the ham sandwich. It was their presentation to the grand jury was more of an indictment on the victims than it was on Jeffrey Epstein. But Ryder was not satisfied with that, and he went over Krischer's head, and he was the chief of police, I believe, at the time, and he went over his head. Yeah, Palm Beach Police, and he went to the the U.S. attorney in Miami,
Alexander Acosta. Yes.
Yep. And alas, it was kicked right back to the state. It's amazing. And that was after really hard work from Marie Villafana, who was his deputy. Did you ever speak to her? She was the lead prosecutor on that case.
I have never spoken to her, but I have her emails between her and Epstein's lawyer. And it just shows how corrupt that process was. I have an email, the deal that they've cooked up where they get the feds give immunity to everybody in that deal, that non-prosecution agreement.
Named and unnamed is the actual language.
Potential co-conspirators, yes.
Potential co-conspirators, named and unnamed. Who gets that kind of broad immunity in a non-prosecution agreement?
No one, except for Jeffrey Epstein.
Agreed. Yeah, and then they agreed not to tell the victims. They agreed to keep them out of the loop. And they like misled them on the trial date, on the sentencing hearing. They misled them on everything. And that was the basis for the Crime Victims' Rights Act case, but which was a very strong case, except for the fact that there was no, they argued that there was no actual case, like there was no crime. There was no crime because they never actually charged him. And it's just an insane loophole. It was, I saw Courtney Wild, Jane Doe 1, in court. I followed her for the Broken Jeffrey Epstein podcast. And she got out of court and she just said to her, they apologized to her, the judge did. They said, I'm just so sorry this happened to you. And when she left court, she cried. She was like, just to hear an apology was so much for me, just to hear an acknowledgement that we were wronged. They have settled for so little, the survivors, they've just settled for breadcrumbs this whole time. And that moment in court, that really that showed it to me. I mean, I saw it, I experienced it up front, how little that they got.
The Crime Victims' Rights Act wasn't heard by the Supreme Court, but now the Supreme Court is contemplating whether it should hear Ghislaine Maxwell's case.
It's insane.
And unfortunately, Ghislaine Maxwell does have a case because she was charged in the Southern. She wasn't charged. The non-prosecution agreement was from the Southern District of Florida. And her lawyers are arguing that she should be given blanket immunity to all districts because it was the Southern District gave her immunity. And that was the rationale that the feds used for picking up Epstein and then prosecuting Maxwell, was that the Southern District of New York didn't have to abide by the Southern District of Florida, which generally isn't the case, because if a mafia turncoat gets immunity from the Southern District and gets relocated to the witness protection program, their immunity is categorical. So unfortunately, Ghislaine Maxwell has an argument, and I really hope, I mean, she was put into when she was in Florida, she was put into a dormitory style living, which is the cushest part of a prison. It's generally prisoners that have done time and have been exemplary prisoners and are nearing the end of their sentence, you put into dormitory style living. But
she's been complaining the whole time. Her family has been just going off about her conditions. But, she's not named. There are 4 co-conspirators who were named. We believe that it was Epstein's assistants, but Ghislaine Maxwell is not one of them. But still, like I said, there's that caveat: potential co-conspirators, named and unnamed, and she'll argue that she is one of the unnamed potential co-conspirators, which I could also argue. No, I'm kidding. But anybody could argue that in a insane way. I think the whole case is just,
it's justice turned on its head.
It's really, it's mind boggling.
And that's why Epstein Justice is so important, because we cannot let the government give a immunity to a bunch of pedophiles that were molesting little girls. We can't do that. I mean, just self-preservation as a country. I think America might be on its way to losing its soul, but if it allows Epstein and those perpetrators to walk, I think our government will have fully lost its soul. And with Epstein Justice, we have two simple objectives. We want to know why the government covered up child sex trafficking, which is aiding and abetting child sex trafficking, and we want the perpetrators to be prosecuted. Very, very simple. We distilled it to the two most simple things that we could come up with, and now it's up to America to decide whether they want to join us or not.
Yeah. I do want to ask you about one thing that you've said in the past about Stan Pottinger and how he had a conflict of interest while representing the Epstein victims. I know he was Virginia Giuffre's lawyer at one time, and he worked with David Boies, who was also Virginia's attorney when she went after Prince Andrew for his sexual abuse that she alleged. So, apparently Brad Edwards, another lawyer involved in this case, confronted him for these conflicts of interest. What were they exactly for our listeners?
Well, Stan was an assistant U.S. attorney. And if you needed a cover up, Stan was your man. I call him the Forrest Gump of cover ups.
Really?
Yeah. He covered up the Martin Luther King killing. He covered up Kent State, where a National Guard shot and murdered 4 people. He covered the CIA was outed with a bunch of malfeasance, including Operation Chaos, which was spying on Americans. He covered that up. And he covered up the FBI's program to spy on Americans called COINTELPRO. He covered that up. And then after he'd covered all these crimes up, he said to himself, I've been covering up all these crimes. I'm going to become a criminal and make some real money. And he put together an arms deal with the Hashemi brothers. They were from Iran. And this was when Iran, in 1980, when Iran was a combatant state. So this would have been high treason. And he was caught on tape discussing this arms deal with the Hashemi brothers and how they were going to get the arms out of the United States and the various machinations that are going to be required to smuggle the arms into Iran. And he was actually caught on tape explaining to the Hashemi brothers how they were going to do this.
How do you not lose your law license by doing something like this?
Here's what happened. Rudolph Giuliani, that paragon of integrity, lost the tape. The Department of Justice, they said they lost the tape that incriminated Stan Pottinger. And
wow, so insidious.
Therefore, he was able to walk,
corruption.
And he would go on to represent the Epstein victims. And actually, David Boies conscripted him very quickly when he started to represent the Epstein victims.
Are you suggesting that he made deals on both sides?
I'm suggesting that Stan Pottinger has a long history of intelligence, and it's kind of strange that David Boies would conscript him almost immediately when he started taking on Epstein victims, which we know Epstein is an intelligence operation. So that...
You think to help him with the case, he used Stan, not to...
Well, however you want to explain help or define help, but Stan Pottinger wasn't the paragon of compassion to a number of these Epstein victims. There was an Epstein victim named Sarah Ransom who tried to kill herself. She jumped out a window, and she was recovering, and she was on heavy psychiatric drugs and pain medication. And Stan Pottinger was pressing her to take the settlement that was being offered by the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. And as I said earlier, that program is bad news because victims, they heal by talking about what they've been through and the hell they've been through. But if someone takes money from that program and signs a release, I mean, they can talk about their other perpetrators, but they can't sue them. And that's really just really heinous, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it is. They shouldn't have those sort of conditions to take the money for the pain that they've been through. Nick, this was really, really great. I appreciate your time. And hey, who knows? You may get this independent committee. We can only, who knows what will happen?
You should help us.
Maybe
you should help us.
I feel like as a journalist, there is a line between being an advocate and a journalist. I'm a
journalist, and I believe in this. I mean, I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive, to be a journalist and then also to be an activist. A lot of journalists have become activists.
Yeah.
So you should sign on to Epstein Justice, and you could be a great help to us.
All right, I'll think about it. Thank you. And all the listeners who want to sign on to Epstein Justice, they should check it out. What's the website again for everyone?
It's pretty simple, epsteinjustice.com. And we have webinars, and we're organizing people by state. So we are going to succeed at this, and I believe that we are, but we need people like you, Tara, to help us.
I know, and I appreciate that. I think, though, as I'm a bit more of a traditional journalist in the sense that I draw a line between advocacy and journalism, and I do that to maintain my credibility and, in certain, and everybody has a different way of doing journalism, but that's my that's why I stand by the no bias tagline. And so as much as there are injustices and I highlight those stories, I there's a line for me.
With this, I mean, you've written some very good articles on Jeffrey Epstein and his minions, and you wrote an article about his helpers that should all be in prison for multiple counts of child trafficking.
Yeah. It's called The Women Who Enabled Jeffrey Epstein. It's a long piece on Politico magazine. I wrote it back, I think, in 2021. Yeah.
And the New York Times wrote an article about those women in 2019. So we have enough evidence on those women. I mean, the Department of Justice could indict those women for child trafficking.
They claim that they are victims themselves, and some of them are represented by the same lawyers as the victims. It's really quite tangled and messy.
And they've Kellen, Groff, and Ross have been taken care of very well. Kellen has a multi-million-dollar home in New York and a multi-million-dollar home in Miami. And we haven't heard from Nadia Marcinkova for about a year, so I don't know where she's at. I wonder where she's at, though. But she
goes by so many names.
Go ahead.
She goes by so many names. Hard to find her. Well, what was that?
Sorry. I've been looking for her. I'm pretty good at finding people, so we'll see what happens.
Good luck. Let me know. All right. Well, we'd love to do a follow-up with you soon, and best of luck to your mission. And we will see what happens next. And we're paying attention to this vote. I know a lot of people have reacted to some of the reporting I've done on Lisa Murkowski and her connections to Ghislaine Maxwell's husband. And I'm sure she's getting a lot of phone calls about that.
Well, Lisa Murkowski was our legislator of the week this week.
Oh, was she?
Yeah. Her name went out to about 80,000 people.
Oh, so they're getting a lot of...
I'm sure that they're getting some calls. Yeah. And that's how we're going to beat it.
Do you agree that she should have had to disclose her relationship with Epstein, with Ghislaine Maxwell's husband and Alice Rogoff and the connection she had with Ghislaine before she voted?
Absolutely. But that hasn't prevented, ethical conflicts haven't prevented people from voting along the lines of Epstein. So that's,
I know.
We just have to come to the really stark reality that our government, the politicians in our government, a lot of them are compromised. A lot of them are blackmailed. Why else would they vote against an investigation into a bunch of child molesters?
They also feel the pressure from President Trump too to cover for him.
I believe that too, but it's so wrong. I mean, this is in life. Very seldom you know what to do. I mean, yesterday I had sushi for lunch. I don't know if that was the right thing or it wasn't the right thing. But in this case, and it's very rare, do you know categorically what to do? And so for me to pursue this, I think I'm categorically doing the right thing.
I would agree with you. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
And that's why I've been at it since 2012. Well, actually 2002 is when I started investigating this type of phenomena.
Yeah, no, it's horrible. It's the kind of thing you can only imagine, and then you find out it's real. All right, Nick. Well, we all appreciate you and your work, and keep digging and keep us posted, and love to have you on again soon. Of the Tara Palmeri Show, thank you again for tuning in. I am so grateful to all of you. We hit a major milestone on YouTube. I keep bringing it up, but we hit 100,000 subscribers. Thank you all for that. We're soon to hit 30,000 subscribers at the Red Letter. That's my newsletter where you can get my exclusive reporting straight to your inbox. It's a way to support my independent journalism by becoming a paid subscriber. You can find my work at tarapalmeri.com. That's TARAPALMERI.com. I want to thank my producer, Eric Abenate. I want to thank Adam Stewart, who does my graphics and thumbnails, and Abby Baker, who handles the research. I'll be back again this week.